Shanghai is a major financial and trade center for China. However, the recent outbreak there has cut Shanghai's first quarter GDP growth to 3.1%, a big drop from last year's 8.1%. How is this affecting China's economy as a whole?
Yes, last month, Shanghai suffered from pandemic hit. Recent days, new increased patients number is less than 100, and Shanghai has held communities transmission, and we have confidence with efforts by Shanghai people and the support by whole countries. Shanghai will return to the normal life next month, and certainly Shanghai will continue contribute to national development. We have that real confidence to that. We must see the important meeting last month, the political bureau meeting of Chinese Communist Party, and draw the priorities for our efforts, including 3 principles. The pandemic should be prevented, economy should be stable, and development should be safe. We must realize the goal set by Chinese Communist Party.
Some say that China's dynamic zero-COVID policy is damaging global economic recovery, for instance, by blocking global supply chain. What's your response to that?
China successfully controlled the pandemic. We contribute not only to our domestic development, also we made great contribution to the supply chain of the whole world. That's why we see how many Chinese products, including healthcare products, supplied to the whole world. Again, we emphasize the supply chain will operation need the global efforts. We should continue to contain the pandemic, and also we should make every efforts to avoid another political virus made negative impact to global chain. I means ideological line cut by United States. Unfortunately, that's a leading economy, but I think their vision is too narrow. They want to get that advantage of competition. That's understandable, but I must say to American friends, if you want to keep that competition ability, that's fine, but that's based on market principles, not use the ideological line to cut the business relations. That's, yes, damage to others, but finally damage to yourself.
As we know, China's economic growth target for this year is 5.5%. But the IMF recently has lowered its economic growth forecast for China to 4.4%. So what challenges does China's economy face? And how can China overcome them to achieve its economic target?
International Monetary Fund is a very important international financial organization. Here with this powerful influence, China is a key member of IMF. I respect their professionality. However, not every time IMF prediction is correct. Just use the figure of 2020 as an example. That year, due to the pandemic hit to the Chinese economy, and IMF predict Chinese economy growth is 1%. However, finally how much achieved by China? 2.3%, more than 100% higher than the prediction of IMF. So first quarter of this year, Chinese economic development is 4.8. It's begin very stable as a beginning. And the second quarter we recognize the reality is the economic growth should be lower than fourth quarter. And the good thing is now in Jilin, in Shanghai, the life is gradually returned to normal. And we believe second half of year, Chinese economy will develop more well. And also the last Communist Party meeting, the political bureau meeting particularly mentioned the two important economic terms. One is initial lead, and another one is the redundancy rate. And use that very simple way to explain. First one is that to do something before the need. And second thing is that to prepare something in case the worst scenario, to make the system well operation. So that's we always say that's the bottom line thinking. And with the whole policy comprehensively in the place, that Chinese economy will continue keep the sustainable development.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has responded to high inflation by raising its benchmark interest, which has raised the concern of a possible recession of the United States. Do you have the same concern?
Federal Reserve take policy too late, including former Chairman Bernanke very openly to say that's made inflation in U.S. will continue for a relatively long time. And now there's a need more tough tightening policy. And the result is that's a recession. And how balance control inflation and avoid big recession, that's a real test to the Federal Reserve. And that's U.S. side. And also that's big impact to the international financial market stability. And the suffered country, firstly, is a developing country. Less developed country is suffered more. So that's why we really need global monetary and fiscal policy cooperation. We call this macroeconomic policy cooperation coordination, and the G20 should play the very fundamental role. Unfortunately, now U.S. and the G7 countries think, and their interest is the top priority, and we will see what that's real impact to the global financial market. Again, to emphasize, global economy is integrated. No one country can avoid the suffer from big global crisis. That's why we worry about current situation, the financial crisis, the food crisis, and the energy crisis. This is already open said by Secretary General of UN, Mr. Guterres.
And how will the situation affect China's economy, and how should China respond to all these problems?
So Chinese economy already deeply integrated with the whole world. If there's global economy in crisis, particularly financial crisis, certainly will have negative impact to the Chinese economy. That's why we must do everything, firstly domestic, keep our economy with sustainable growth. And also we need that deepening structural reform. Same time, we more open the door to the whole world. We also need that coordination with global partners about macroeconomic policy, also regarding the standard formulation. And that's in line with every country's interest, particularly big country.
From the recent remarks made by Janet Yellen, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, we can tell that American leaders are more interested in national security interests rather than business. And The Russia-Ukraine conflict has lasted for almost 3 months, disrupting the world economic order. So this circumstance has prompted a discussion on creating a new Bretton Woods system. So what's your view on this?
Secretary Yellen, she is very professional, and I had many meetings with her. I highly respect her. But I must say, as Secretary of U.S. Treasury, she now is real stand for U.S. interest. She do everything to protect U.S. interest, particularly the U.S. dollar value. Regarding the term used, the Bretton Woods system, and that's also with the historical development. Actually, that's 1971, U.S. already broke the commitment for the gold price. And in that period begin and until now, that's used as way is credit, U.S. dollar credit, and connect with the U.S. debt market development. And that means U.S. put his national credit on dollar. So now there's U.S. bottom line to use the dollar as a weapon. For example, take Russia out of the international payment system. I see we need that watch, but we also must see current reality is ruble value is back to February 24. So we will see what happens. But I think that the U.S. dollar currently is continue dominate in the global trade payment. All need us, all people in the world, particularly the specialists, monitor that very closely. And that's not only economic or financial term, is connect closely with the change of international order.
So in your opinion, what would this new Bretton Woods system like? And what role should China play in this possible new system?
China always hope we want to maintain current global order, and however, they must be improved. They must reflect the changed situation that developing country and emerging countries share to the global economy is increased. And we understand there's a need coordination, sometimes need negotiation.